Your Creative Push, episode 163.
Don't ever let your art be something that you think is a measure of who you are. The measure of who you are is your awesomeness, and you've already won the game.
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Youngmin Brown, and my guest today is Gary Taxali. Gary is an award-winning multimedia artist from Canada who draws inspiration from vintage comics and advertising, producing an assortment of graphic design, fine art, street art, all rolled into one. His work has been seen not just in print and museums throughout North America and Europe, but on toys, wine labels, coins for the Canadian Mint, and clothing. And actually, Gary, if it's cool, I'd like to start there because I think one of the coolest things is to not only have your work not necessarily featured, but engraved on coins. I think that's one of the coolest things. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Hi, I mean, absolutely. It's a project that I did about 4 years ago. I was approached by the Royal Canadian Mint, and at first I was a little hesitant because I thought it was going to be something really conservative, because that's something that happens to us artists sometimes, where you get a commission and they like what you do, but they want you to kind of do a watered down, safe version of it.
Sure.
But anyhow, it wasn't the case at all. They gave me lifestyle themes. The lifestyle themes were New Baby, Oh Canada, Tooth Fairy, Happy Birthday, Wedding, and Christmas. And in these themes, they asked me to just kind of do my own kind of personal take on it. But as I moved forward the project, they said, we'd really like your typography. We'd love it if you did the type as well. And so I was pretty happy about that. They also put my initials on each coin. So I did the typography, I did the character, and essentially it was like kind of a dream project because they gave me creative reign. There was one case where I was having coffee with the vice president of the Mint. He was in town from Ottawa, and he said, we were wondering why you did this design with some characters sticking their tongue out for the O Canada coin. And then we looked up your work and thought, okay, this is fine because this is something this guy does in his work anyway. So in a way, it was kind of like the opposite project where they're like, we want to brand these as Gary Taxali coins. So we want you to do the art that you do. So other than it be on a coin and not doing something too crazy wild and out there, it really does encapsulate my vibe and in my true aesthetic. In this, as you said, kind of engraved or reliefed fashion, which, by the way, is pretty incredible because our Mint is capable of doing what they call 4 levels on a coin. So they can get some pretty intricate details. And so we do commissions for countries like Australia. We make coins for them. But one of the most amazing things about this project was my last name isn't my original last name. It was Vora, and it was changed 300 years ago to Taxali by my because of my ancestor. He invented a coin that was difficult to counterfeit, so the Maharaja of India knighted him Taxali, which means maker or the shepherd of the mint.
Whoa,
isn't that wild?
That is cool.
If that's not like a bizarro, serendipitous coincidence, I don't know what is.
Yeah, for everybody listening, they know I'm obsessed with serendipity. I'm obsessed with synchronicity, things that kind of seem like a sign. So that's so cool that it's like full circle.
I really believe that serendipity exists all around us, and you just have to open your eyes and just kind of stop and take a look at it because it's rampant. It's everywhere. It's in our lives on big levels, on little levels, and it's really kind of refreshing to know that when you are aware of it, how much more relaxing I think life can be in terms of submitting to the process of what just life is.
Absolutely. It gives you that feeling of like relief, almost, that, where you feel like you're on the right path or that you're doing the right thing.
Absolutely.
And I also think if you kind of ask for something out loud and then, as you said, be willing to look for the signs, you'd be surprised what can happen.
I'm in total agreement with you.
You mentioned that sometimes when things like that happen, like, making something for a mint, you were a little bit worried about them kind of watering it down. Have you had other experiences where that's happened? And then, like, how do you deal with that?
In the beginning, it used to happen a lot. And I think it was the result of maybe not being tried and tested, not really being known as an established working artist, and people also just thinking they could get away with it. And they often can. When you're starting out, you're just happy to get the work, happy to get the commissions and so forth. But after a while, when you just really start putting out the work that you love, I think that attracts people who do respect that. They respect the relationship enough to let you do your own thing. Sometimes I'll have clients, like in the world of publishing, like magazine art directors will say, here's an idea. And I'll just kind of look at it and come up with my own idea and send it. And they often just say, yours is better than what we sent you. So I don't really like make a super big deal out of it. And, there's been a few occasions where creative directors have apologized and said, yeah, we should just, it's better if you just do your own thing. I mean, that said, I'm not adverse to input into collaboration where there is like a healthy dialogue and back and forth, and that's also made me a better artist. So yeah, in that sense, it doesn't really happen too much. I just thought for a project so grand like doing Coins for the Royal Canadian Mint, it looked like it would have been that kind of project, but it was so refreshing that it wasn't.
Yeah, I'm happy for you. And the fact that they put your initials on it, that's so badass.
It's pretty incredible, right? One of the coins that really struck me in the beginning, which was the most difficult, was the wedding coin. And the reason was because most difficult because, wedding is the union of two people. And coming from a straight male perspective, I was thinking about graphics and form, from a perspective of my version of what the union of a wedding is. And I was having some problems just in terms of composition. But then it dawned on me, we're one of the few countries in the world where same-sex marriage is legal. So I thought the coin needs to reflect the non-gender specific union of marriage. And so I did these two characters that are like kind of wedding bands, like anthropomorphized in the union of marriage or wedding or love. And the gay community liked it so much. Dan Savage, the sex columnist from Seattle, called it Canada's gay coin, which I thought was really terrific. and what I also thought was really terrific was that every one of the coins, they bear the visage of the Queen. And so every design has to go to Buckingham Palace to get approved by the Queen. And so I imagine her or her people saw my designs and just thought they were pretty sweet and benign and signed off on them, and probably just looked at the wedding coin and thought, okay, that's fine. And so I kind of loved the fact that, the monarchy say, oh yeah, right on for gay marriage. So I'm down with that.
It's so cool, and congrats to you for that. Do you get those like when you're telling that story, like the idea of not quite having the composition down and not like knowing that it's there but not quite getting there yet? What do you do? Like, what's the process of getting to the final thing where it's right?
Well, drawing pictures in boxes is pretty easy, and I guess maybe it's just something about the way our brains are made and the way we take in the world and the way we have grown up, being influenced by film, influenced by television shows, or just that format of boxes and composing within a box seems to be kind of something that is is kind of like a natural response to things. I mean, even like from a small age, you hand a small child a piece of paper, it's a box. And so we just are constantly looking at that form. Whereas with a circle, it's not a common form to draw and paint within. So it automatically has compositional issues like right out of the starting gate. Because also there's the considerations of the coin having to have the typography and the circumference inside the ring of the thing, and having something that's graphically strong that doesn't look like it's floating over and over again. So you can have like a floating thing, but I like to do something that has a bit more dynamic energy, and that is why two characters who are in love in a circle automatically creates like some sort of like energetic issues that I think are kind of frustrating to compose with.
And then what's the process like of then figuring it out? Like, is it just, do you sit there and stare at it, or do you kind of like look to other things for inspiration?
I don't stare at it because staring at it will just make you stir crazy. And I also believe that creativity doesn't come from your mind. I think it comes from someplace else. Maybe, if you want to call it your essence, if you want to call it your soul, if you want to call it, your higher power, whatever it is for people. I do think that the mind plays an integral part of it, but the way to combat any kind of creative problem is to just make, and then let the solving take its own form by the process of actually making the marks. So to answer your question, what I would do in a case like this is I would take the form, in this case it's a circle, and I photocopy it. So I have about like 10 or 20 photocopies, and I'll just keep making photocopies as I go. So I'll just draw over and over and over again within that shape, and just think about a combination of idea and form. And in the world of communication design, those are the two things, form and function. And I'm volleying back between the two, because the form can never take precedence over the function, yet the function is rendered kind of just really just boring without an interesting form or aesthetic to the thing. So the hand gets in a way most of the thinking, most of the heavy lifting, and so it does all the drawing. And then from there, I'll just kind of say, okay, you know what? That is like a kind of an interesting form. That's an interesting character that's sort of bringing out a bit of the idea. And then from there, I'll put other sheets of paper over, kind of like a light table situation, and do tighter drawings. And I'll keep doing tighter and tighter drawings over and over and over again until I have a graphic that I really like. And then from there, I'll do like kind of a tight drawing. And usually at that point, I'll have a safety net of a good form already in place, like from like the composition. And at that point, it's just kind of like automatic pilot.
Yeah, and I've heard you say that before, that you enjoy the excitement of the ride and kind of looking forward to what's happening next. And I think a lot of people struggle with that, like of just being able to kind of go with it. And like, how do they get past that? How do they trust themselves and kind of trust their intuition and kind of just go for a ride, instead of stressing out about the fact that they don't quite know where the ride is going.
Yeah, it's not easy, because our mind likes to remind us of why we should do things. And it is a little bit of a problem when you are trying to conceive of an idea or conceive of a direction, and you're just rejecting everything you're coming up with in favor of just being like, I mean, if it's just banal, if it's common cliche, or if it's just uninteresting, and then you just get into a spiral of negativity. The way I think to exit that is to really have like a daily practice of meditation. And the purpose, I think, of meditation isn't to just like relax or become one with yourself. I mean, all those things, I guess, are just like a nice byproduct of sitting in stillness. But meditation is just kind of like a little reminder of how you kind of want to react to things, like when you're writing or drawing or painting or making music or whatever. So when you're actually physically setting up your environment, like my case would be like pens and brushes, markers and papers and things, and I'll just supplement it with the music I really like. and just make the marks, you surprise yourself all the time. And I think it's probably the easiest way to work that is the most refreshing. I mean, I learned this from like other artists, like, when I was a student too, just work every day at an early age. I mean, I read that quote from Picasso. Like, I mean, being an artist is working every day. Just every day one must do it. And it's not a matter of making the art. It's a matter of just the process of doing it. And the work is just a byproduct of it. It's just, it happens, whether it's good or bad, it's just a record of your process, but it's never, ever more important than the process, because the process never ends. And so I think that is something that has served me well. People will ask me, how do I come up with so many ideas? And I'm never, ever worried about coming up with ideas. Like, I haven't had that issue in years, because I know the secret to coming up with them is to just, like you said, trust. That trust of myself to know that if I just sit down and if I make stuff, something's going to come out and I'll work with it. Yeah, okay, young man, it often happens where I'll like look at something, down the line and think, whoa, what was I thinking? That's not very good. But that's okay though, because that just usually makes me laugh. I don't like beat myself up over it. I just think, well, at the time I felt pretty good about it, so I should honor that rather than look upon my maturity and think, well, I know so much more now. Why did I say that? Or why did I draw that?
Right. And we talk about that on the show too. It's looking back and not necessarily being embarrassed of your old work, but just seeing flaws in it or seeing how you've grown. It's a good sign, because if you look back and you're like, wow, I'm never going to be that good, then you're not, progressing. You're not putting that time in every day and making it like a part of your life so that you do continue to improve.
Totally. I think creativity is just a settling with and honoring and like embracing your idiosyncrasies. And we all have them, right? And if you just kind of say, okay, well, my flaw isn't a negative thing. My flaw is just kind of a little bit of I guess, my style marker or something. And I'm just going to work with it.
Yeah, it's a piece of you.
Yeah.
Now you said you don't struggle like on a daily basis, like coming up with ideas, but do you have any other kind of daily struggles, like when it comes to sitting down and putting that time in, that important kind of meditative like time, drawing and creating?
Yeah. I mean, I'll struggle with some more complex things, like when I'm into the depth of a picture and there's a certain point where it just magically turns into a disaster. And I don't really know how that happens, but it does sometimes. And that quickly gets put in a drawer and never to be spoken of again. Or if it's painting, I'll just, fix over parts of it or whatever. But I think that the struggle needs to be a healthy amount of struggle. I mean, like the way I like to kind of think of it less of a struggle than I do of a challenge. And so if I look at it as a challenge, I think, okay, well, some challenges are crazy. I really don't want to walk on the edge of a mountain on like a 10-inch ridge.
Right.
Because that is not something that I would feel better about accomplishing. I probably have PTSD for like the rest of my life after that, and nightmares I wouldn't be able to shake.
Sure.
But the kind of challenges where I know, all right, if I am going to do a face plant, I'll survive from it. So it is just art. It's just a picture, big deal. So what? Like the worst that can happen is that nobody gets to see it. Or, maybe in some cases, I may have to like ask the client for like a little bit of an extension or something, which I don't even remember the last time doing. So I like to have control of what I'm doing in the picture, but having a bit, maybe 10% of lack of control, which is why I work organically and traditionally, like paintbrushes and screen printing media and so forth. Yeah, so there is that kind of lack of control a little bit. So I see that challenge there. But then there's the other part of that word, struggle, which I think is a cloud that follows all of us around. And that's the struggle of your business, the struggle of aging, the struggle of being pertinent or remaining pertinent, or hopefully one day becoming pertinent, depending on where a person is. And those kinds of things do offer, I guess like those feelings of like, what the hell am I doing, or is this okay? Because it's a popularity contest, and it doesn't matter who you are in the arts. Every person in the arts and in literature even is subject to being part of that popularity contest. And I've reconciled myself with it a long time ago, knowing that it's so meaningless that one should not attach oneself to it in a way that, marks it as like a measure of who we are and what we're trying to say. I mean, it's not easy.
Yeah.
It is kind of the crappy thing about the world we live in. It's not like somebody said, okay, here's universal base income for being an artist or a writer, and it doesn't matter what you do. Here's your sustenance. Here's your food and shelter. We got you. You're good.
We need that person.
But so much of it is attached to, right, like to survival.
Yeah.
And that's the crappy part.
Yeah, that is a crappy part, and being pertinent, I think, is one of those things. A trick that I like to do, so that you can kind of get out of that and kind of create from your heart and not really think about that, is just assume that nobody is gonna like really appreciate your work until like 100 years from now, so that like you're creating for like a future audience, so that you won't even get any type of notoriety during your lifetime. I don't know, I think for me that kind of takes the pressure off a little bit.
Sure. And you're not wrong, because that will be the case no matter what. There's automatic beauty and automatic reverence for the works of dead people. Mm-hmm. You become a historical record. And so, whether it's in a museum or not, or it turns into a novel or something, if it's relatively left intact in some way, I think it will be appreciated.
Yeah, and I guess the best way to make sure that it's around in 1,000 years is to get your stuff on coins. Those are the only things that are going to survive. So you've got that in the bag.
that was a thought that I had when I thought it for the first time, and it actually was kind of a little bit of a maybe a little bit kind of I don't know, like oddly melancholic.
It's cool though. I think it's really cool, and I used to collect coins too, and I think it's just really cool to think about just the history of it, how many hands it's passed through, and just like the fact that it was new at one point but now is so old. I don't know, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Before we let you go, you also have this quote that I love, that you have this obsessive love of doodling. I was wondering what we can learn from an obsessive love of doodling.
I mean, doodling is just the act of playing, and when I just jump in and just start making marks, I can't attach any degree of seriousness to it, because otherwise it becomes scary and I wouldn't even make the thing to begin with. So I have to just, go through the exercise of just letting the hand, make stuff, and it happens on a daily basis for me. For the most part, a daily basis. If it doesn't happen on a certain day, I kind of go a little bit stir crazy and I need to get down to drawing. But I think doodling is also just it's kind of I think it's a very like human expression to react, to react to something. Some people, I guess, have that reaction by singing, playing guitar, or maybe it's that similar kind of exercise where you're just kind of going through this repetitive motion of just having the stimulation of doing that thing that is natural and kind of intrinsic to like the way we want to communicate. So all the artists I know have been doing it since they were small children, and my friends who are musicians, they also say that about their music. And so I think there is that. Like, where I'll just write down in my sketchbook words, and I'll make up words and meanings for words that are just kind of like ridiculous and nonsensical, and I'll sort of clump those into my doodling, so they sort of become part and parcel of the whole process. And I'll even like sometimes run with a theme, and the doodles will kind of reflect that theme. And sometimes the doodles even become part of my artwork, in that I'll take a bunch of them and I'll compile them together and I'll screen print them in my work, just like in their kind of natural raw state. I think hopefully maybe people can learn that it's just like it's a healthy exercise to just make marks. It's a healthy exercise. It opens creative doors. It gives you kind of a break from your real work, yet at the same time feeds your real work. It's kind of a win-win situation.
Interesting. Yeah, it's like an exhaust system almost. We have all this, like, not gas, but we have all this energy inside of us, and to be able to, like you said, make marks or sing or whatever, just get that kind of out of you, you know what I mean? Like, I think we have to, otherwise it just kind of builds up, and you, like you said, you go kind of stir crazy.
I like that word, exhaust. That's a really good metaphor. Yeah, it's true. We got to get this stuff out, and I feel really bad for I feel bad for all of us, but I feel bad for young people who are in the system right now and are being taught to pretty much sit on their hands and sit in these little kind of contraptions, these little desk chair cages where they can't just get up and dance and make marks and jump around and stuff. It actually really is it's a violent thing to teach a certain segment of the population learning styles that aren't natural to them.
Yeah, it's almost like you're stifling the creativity by, like you said, locking them down. Gary, this has been awesome, but it's time for the final push.
Okay.
This is where I ask you to reach to the microphone and grab the shoulder of one of the listeners that you've already really inspired today, and just give them your best words of advice and just push them to pursue their creative passions.
Okay. Hello, listener. Here you are. I'm just reaching out for you. And thank you for not reeling away from me. And all I got to say is that you're awesome, and your awesomeness is apparent to everybody. And don't ever let your art be something that you think is a measure of who you are. It's not. The measure of who you are is your awesomeness, and you've already won the game. So everything that you do creatively is just an extension of that awesomeness. It's not the awesomeness.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, you already are awesome, and it's just like we said, kind of just putting yourself out there to further show people your awesomeness.
Absolutely.
Gary, thank you, man, so much for coming on the show today.
Anytime, man. Lovely to talk to you.
You as well. And you can find Gary on his website. That's GaryTaxali.com, Taxali, or you can go to Taxali.com. On Instagram, he is Taxali, and we will have all of the links to everything we talked about at our show notes page at yourcreativepush.com/Gary Taxali. Gary, thanks again.
Thank you.
Wow, so much fun. I just love the way that guy thinks, the way that he approaches his art. Really think about that. Think about stepping outside of the box like Gary was talking about. We are brought up as little children, given a piece of paper in a box form. Everything that is pretty much presented to us throughout our lives is in box form. So find ways to step outside of that box. And another really interesting thing that Gary does is his methodology of kind of just going for a ride with his art and letting his hand kind of do the work. And I think that going for a ride, like I asked him, is a scary thing for a lot of people. But I love his method of just kind of, just going for it, making 20, 30 copies of the page. And that way you know that you have 20 or 30 chances, and it's not as scary to go for a ride, and to continue to just tighten it up as you develop your final idea. I think this is something that writers do, and I think it's easier for writers to kind of tighten up the words that you've kind of spewed out onto the page during the rough draft. But maybe other artists and musicians don't really think of it that way. It's a scary thing to do, to kind of just see what happens without kind of having that final plan, but try it out. And finally, what Gary said there in his final push: you are awesome. I don't know if I tell you that enough, but as this podcast continues to grow, as our Instagram community, Facebook community continues to grow, I am shocked by how talented you all are. It's amazing to see that you listen to this podcast, and this podcast is helping you to create this insane art, these wonderful creative outpourings. It's just insane to me. So keep it up. If you don't follow me yet, at Your Creative Push on Instagram, you can find me on Facebook. Keep sharing your work because it inspires the hell out of me. So you are awesome, and please go and get your work done. We will see you on Friday with a fresh new episode if you need the push again. But until then, keep being awesome, keep creating, and we'll see you then. I love you all. Bye. Never miss a push. Head to yourcreativepush.com/subscribe to find the easiest way for you to subscribe to the podcast.